Ange Postecoglou told Spurs fans at the parade that television series are usually more exciting in season 3 than they are in season 2. But unfortunately, he's not going to be able to witness season 3 because Ange Postecoglou has been relieved of his duties. He's been sacked, and the club have said on Twitter, "We are extremely grateful to Ange for his commitment and contribution during his 2 years at the club. Ange will always be remembered as only the 3rd manager in our history to deliver a European trophy. Thank you, Ange." It's official. Ange Postecoglou has been sacked. People, welcome back to the channel. You know what you need to do. Like, share, comment, subscribe. I appreciate you guys' support every single day and every single time. So if you haven't already, please do so. Like, share, comment, subscribe. But listen, you've seen the title, you've seen the thumbnail. Ange Postecoglou is no longer the manager of Tottenham Hotspur. And I've seen a couple of reactions because when that happened, I was out, so I couldn't react immediately. And I've seen a couple of reactions, and naturally, Spurs fans, or I would say some of them, were quite emotional, disappointed, don't understand why he was sacked, etc., etc. But I'm going to say this regarding the club making the decision, first of all. Right decision. Daniel Levy, you can say what you want about him. He's been criticized left, right, and center by the fans, rival fans, journalists, pundits, everyone. But one thing you're going to have to give him is that he made that right decision. He made that right decision. That was always the right decision. Because one thing you can't do in football is mix business with emotion. Because when you do mix business with emotion, you end up in a situation where you're like Man United at the end of last season. Winning the FA Cup, Ten Hag still in charge. Questions were asked. Does he go? Does he stay? You look at the season, it was horrible. Lowest finish at that point before we finished 15th this season. All of the factors that were called upon and all of the factors that were mentioned were leaning towards the fact that, yes, Ten Hag should have been sacked. But then the fans came into play in that situation. And this is why, in my opinion, fans are a very important part of every football club. But you shouldn't consult fans or take into account what fans think or what fans feel when it comes to decisions like that. The mistake that Man United made at the time was to listen to fans. And the group of fans that took it upon themselves to write an official letter to the club, which, in my opinion, had a huge impact in the club making the decision to let Ten Hag stay. So I applaud Daniel Levy for making the decision that he made, because you can't mix business with emotion. You just can't. Because later down the line, it's going to cost you. And it's going to come back to bite you. 100%. Which brings me to the next point. The football and the actual performances that were played. What made Spurs fans think that with the season they've had, in the Premier League especially, things were going to be different next season? It wasn't going to be different by a magic wand. No, you would have to work in pre-season. You would have to work on the tactics. You would have to work on stuff tactically in terms of personnel, maybe bring in a different type of player or different type of players. You would have to change something physically and actively work on it. It's not because you won a Europa League that all of a sudden things were going to be different. No, you actively have to change stuff to make the season better or next season better than it was last season. Tottenham Hotspur, please, let's not act like this was an amazing season. Yes, that trophy was amazing for them. 100%. The first trophy in 17 years. In my lifetime, I've only seen Spurs win 2. 2008, the League Cup, and now the Europa League. So yes, they needed this trophy. I agree. And Ange done really well. But you look at the league form, And that's just horrendous. That's absolutely horrendous. 22 league losses. 22 league losses. 64 goals scored, 65 conceded. That is not good enough. No matter what you think about Spurs, Spurs should never be in the position to be losing 22 league games. And I'm sorry, if you really want to be that harsh, you look at the run in the Europa League. And again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful here. I'm really not. But you look at Tottenham's... 1 second, people. Let me just pull up Spurs' run in the Europa League. You pull up their run in the Europa League. Post Eintracht Frankfurt, because that was a good opponent. Bodo Glimt. Bodo Glimt, you played in the Europa League. Who else? Elfsborg. I'm sorry, no. And then in the final, you played one of the worst Manchester United sides in the history of Man United. So credit to Spurs again for winning it, and credit to Ange for keeping his word, because he did say he wins stuff in his second season. So credit to him for keeping his word. But in the long run, it was never going to work out. Switching over to Ange himself. On a personal level, he's leaving Spurs with his head held high because, like I said, he delivered his promise. He kept his word. He said, I always win stuff in my second season. Boom, he did. Nothing you can tell him, because even if he was to do an interview years down the line, he can look straight into the camera and say, I've done my job. I've done my job. But that comes with a downside, because Ange Postecoglou has been way too stubborn, especially in the league. And it's ironic that the only time he didn't stick to his tactics was in the final, where he was just like, listen, we need to win a game here. We need to win a game of football. So I'm going to change up the whole thing and go against all of my principles just to win this trophy. But that brings me to the question, why did he not do the same in the Premier League? And if there's one thing you have to be able to do in the Premier League, and everyone knows that, you have to be able to adapt as a manager. You can have your system in place. You can have your principles in place. You can have your way of playing in place, but you have to be able to adapt, because you're always going to come up against different types of opponents where your classic 4-3-3 might not work. So you might have to switch to a 4-2-3-1. Your classic, 3-4-3 or 3-5-2 may not work. So you might have to switch to a 4-2-3-1, to a 4-4-2. You might have to switch things around according to what opponent you're playing. But Ange was just persistent with his high line, conceding goals left, right, and centre. In terms of personnel, yes, injuries might have played a role, but 22 losses. Whew, wow. I mean, we complained about our losses in the league. Goodness me, but Spurs, 22. There's 38 games in the Premier League, my friends. Wow. Yeah, the decision was the right one. And ultimately, Ange lived and died by his tactics. You live and you die by your decisions as a manager in the Premier League. You live and die by them. And, Ange lived and died by it. He died by it, sorry. It might work somewhere else, but definitely not in the Premier League. In the Premier League, you will always get punished. And what makes Spurs fans think, by the way, that it was going to be any different, especially in the Champions League? You think you can play that type of football, going up against the likes of Real Madrid, who just got a new manager in, against the likes of Bayern Munich, against the likes of Barcelona, against the likes of even some of the lesser teams? Because some of these lesser teams might come to your yard and just slap you 3-0 and go home. And surprise, surprise, the Champions League is now a league phase. Or it's got a league format now. So this cup run that you had in the Europa League, Don't try that in the Champions League, my friends. Do not try it in the Champions League because it's a league format now. I reckon if Ange would have stayed in charge, Spurs would have gotten absolutely destroyed in the Champions League. Playing the way they play, I'm not talking about the players themselves, because they do have some fantastic ballers in there. But nah, come on, man. Come on. And now, obviously, there's talks of replacements coming in. And, you know, Marco Silva's been mentioned. Thomas Frank's been mentioned. I can see Thomas Frank going to Spurs. I can see that happening. Obviously, it's going to take a lot. They're going to have to package everything together, etc., etc. Brentford, I feel for them because it feels like they're losing everyone at the moment. But I can see Thomas Frank going to Spurs and implementing his style of play. I think he's a manager that's very, very adaptable. I think he's someone who knows the league inside out. And I think he's someone that can make a difference in that Spurs team or with that Spurs squad. I genuinely think he can make an impact, you know? So, yeah. Ange Postecoglu's been sacked. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Any Spurs fans in here, let me know what you think as well, guys. And, yeah, people, like, share, comment, subscribe. Let's roll to 20K still. We've passed 16K. I appreciate you guys. Shout out to everyone locking in with the content on TikTok as well. I appreciate you guys every single time. We passed 10K on Instagram. We've reached a 10K mark. So we're moving. We're moving. And the Club World Cup, is around the corner. I can't wait to sit down and talk to you guys about this. And it's going to be fun, man. We're going to have a fun summer. So like, share, comment, subscribe, people. Thank you for watching. And I'm out. Peace.